I wanna do now is making it last. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together.
Once again, it's time for a conversation. This is the Making It Last podcast, where it's all about helping each other to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but most importantly, with each other. And the question for discussion this time around is, how can we have better relationships with young people? Now, who best to speak to such a topic than young persons? We have three this time around, and they will introduce themselves, starting with Roxanne White.
Hello, I'm Roxanne White, Youth Empowerment Officer for Manchester.
Hello, my name is Kevaughn Knight, Member of Parliament, Youth Member of Parliament for Northwest Manchester.
And I'm Jessica Timoll, fourth year student at the Northern Caribbean University.
Thanks for being here. So, how can we have better relationships with young persons
Okay.
or young people?
Yeah, having a good relationship with young people kind of starts with trying to put yourself in their space. If you're not putting yourself in their space, then anything else that comes after that, like finding out what they like and stuff like that, it really won't happen if you don't make an intentional effort to put yourself in their space. So I think that is like the first step to building a relationship with young people.
I think that you have to understand the backgrounds of young people. You have to understand that these young people interact with different people, such as parents, siblings, and even persons from their institutions or wherever they're from. And we have to understand that these persons may have different socioeconomic backgrounds that may influence their behaviors or other things, or they may have had experiences with juvenile delinquency, etc. And so we have to understand their space and be honest and transparent with them.
And as Roxanne said, it's all about building a connection with young people, because young people want to know that you understand them, understand what's going on with them, know that you have been in that position before. Try to make sure that you're someone they can talk to, be there for them, build a connection with them.
All right, be a little bit more, because somebody's saying, yeah, she's saying I should build a connection. How do I do that? Give me something that somebody can do to build a connection with the youth.
Okay, so one of the ways I build connections with young people, I'll be like at my space where I work at the Manchester Youth Information Centre. And sometimes the young people just come in and they just want to use the computers and that's it. When you're using computers, it doesn't really allow for that personal contact because they're staring at a screen.
That's right.
So what I do when they come into the space is I notice things about them. So a person might have on a sneakers that looks really unique, or if they have a name that I've never really heard that name before, I'll be like, yo, I like your sneakers now. I think that's a really cool sneakers. Where you get it from? Which size you wear? And then if they have on a size that's close to mine, I say, all right, before you leave, just take off the shoes and give me. And they'll start laughing. And from that laughter, then it often spins into a conversation. So like, today I have on my Timbs. All right, miss. All right, make we exchange, miss. And that's how the conversation starts.
Okay. And this is not just to you, but for everybody else who's here. How then do you strike that balance? Because there's some people who will say, but you're being a little bit too, as they would say, familiar. So how then do you make sure that you strike the balance, that it is that you're just building a connection? Anybody can answer that.
All right, since I have the mic, I'll go.
Not a problem.
With young people, once they are aware of what their boundaries are, they tend to respect your boundaries once you establish them. So for me, I make them aware of the fact that, listen, while I'm your youth empowerment officer, I'm a youth first, so we can relate as youth. But in certain points in the conversation, I let them, if they say something that I feel is inappropriate or is blurring the lines, and I say, okay, we're cool, but that is not appropriate. Even though I'm a youth, I'm also an officer. So I make them aware of that so that the boundaries are maintained. Some of the things, I'm not going to give them a checklist of boundaries.
Beautiful.
But when
Right.
things come up, I adjust them when they come up. And some of them will push to see how much you tolerate, but you have to be consistent. So you can't have the boundary today and don't have the boundary tomorrow. You have to be consistent with it. Once they really get it, then they be like, okay, all right, Miss White, I get you. And they move on from there.
Okay. Anybody else wants to comment on that?
I concur with the argument about boundaries, and also I believe adding respect with that, respecting them as they respect you, it's a key integral part in building the relationship.
Beautiful. Since you have the mic, Kevaughn, you spoke about understanding the background. Elaborate a little bit more on that for me, because in understanding somebody's background, it means you will then have to ask questions and maybe even probe. And some of our young people sometimes are not that receptive to that, and they might think you're trying to dig into their business a little bit too much. So how then can that happen?
Using Roxanne's analogy, you should strike a communication balance with them. Use things that they can relate to.
Okay.
And from that area, you can begin to gnaw at the tree and try to find out other little information bit by bit, because you have to understand that youth relationships don't just come at one. It's not a one-time thing. Beautiful. It's an overtime thing.
Yes.
So like that way, you're going to have to make investments. And like investments, you can't just go to a bank and just make a lot of withdrawals. You have to start to pour out into the person also and let them know that, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I've been through this. I've done that too. Or I know somebody who has done that. And so they'll become easier able to trust you and tell you information.
Yeah. You said, Roxanne, earlier about being intentional. Speak some more on that.
All right. I work with some dynamic young people. The nature of what I do allows me to interact with the students in high schools and tertiary institutions, but also relating to the guy on the corner. In being intentional, as you said, when I'm about to have a conversation with anybody, whether it be young persons or young at heart,
I can relate, yes.
One of the things I tend to do is observe people. So when they come into my space, whether it is in the office or I'm on the road and they're there, you can tell a lot about a young person based on how they interact with the persons around them or interact with the space. So because I would have been observing them, when I go to have a conversation to initiate the connection, I would have already picked up on certain things. So whatever I speak to or how I approach them, it is very strategic.
Okay.
Because I can't approach a guy on the corner the same way that I would approach a student.
Okay.
Totally different environment, totally different background. So you can't really expect to approach them in the same way. So whatever you do has to be intentional. Even Kevaughn mentioned the whole sharing with them. You find that when you begin to share your experiences, either you can do it in a general way. You might not have to necessarily let them know that this is what I've been through. You could say, oh, I've observed this, or I had an experience where, or you can tell them about your own experience. Understanding boundaries, of course, because you can't really tell them too much. But you find that once you share with them, it's kind of like, oh, all right, yeah, man, she the young too, and yeah, man, she do this, whatever. So you find that they will be more inclined to share with you than if you act as, oh, me never do that in my life yet. So intentional in how you approach and continue building the connection.
Okay. It continues to be such a pleasure to be having this conversation, and the conversation will continue next week. So This was Making It Last, a podcast all about where we have tried to give you tips to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, with other people. So I know you want to hear just what else we will say about this particular question. How can we have better relationships with young people? This is Noreen Daly. Until next time.
You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.